ways. So welcome to Stuttgart UX Meetup number 51. This is our fourth remote one too as well. So we're slowly getting the hang of that as well. Yeah, and first of all, thanks once more to everybody for coming. Your hosts tonight are Edwin Cruz, who is our local UX designer at Brandwatch, and also like really very experienced in research. And then myself as the senior director at Brandwatch, senior director of engineering, and also as head of the local Brandwatch teams in Stuttgart. And as such, I feel compelled to briefly tell you about Brandwatch. So bear with me. So Brandwatch is in the business and the space of digital consumer intelligence. And basically that means that we've got a host of digital products or SaaS products and services. And what they do is that they let you find out what billions of consumers think about you, your products, and your competitors. And that enables you to make the best decisions for your business based on the data we provide. We're about 20 people here in Stuttgart, and we're about 550 people worldwide. And yeah, before we dive into tonight's topic, actually a reminder that we since recently have our own YouTube channel. So this will fill up. This also means that we will actually record this session. So yeah, just to let you know that if you don't want your voice or video appearing in that recording, first of all, switch off your camera. And secondly, just let us know, you know, and we can edit it out if need be. Yeah, and obviously, like we will use the breakout rooms feature again, so that we can socialize a bit at the end, and that we will not record, of course, and never publish. So another thing that we're also always looking for is for presentations or workshops or other contributions to this meetup. So if you have one, please get in touch with us. Like if you have an idea for a topic or a presentation that you'd like to give, we're always keen. And you can get in touch via the meetup page or Twitter. That's probably the two easy channels. So without further ado, the agenda tonight is Edwin talking to us about how to interpret user feedback and avoid bad data. Obviously very important. Then we'll do a 15-minute Q&A with Edwin. You can put your questions into the chat during the presentation as well, and then we will address them at the end, and we'll try to read them out always for everybody, and then we'll join in breakout rooms for about half an hour. Cool. Yeah, I've talked to you about that already. I think that's me. Edwin, is there anything I've forgotten before we dive in?
Yeah, just quickly, it would be, I don't think we're going to edit the video before uploading. So just making that clear.
Not edit, right?
Yeah, no, it takes way too much time. That's why we haven't uploaded the last one.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really good. Edwin also did the editing and uploading. So thank you very much, Edwin. Once more at this stage. Yeah, so I said that mainly thinking of the initial chat. So
yeah, okay, yeah. No, that we can definitely cut that up. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, during the Q&A, etc.
Yeah, cool.
Or during the presentation at least.
Sweet.
Q&A. We won't edit. Cool. Fantastic. With 32 participants now, Edwin. So take it away.
Thank you. You might need to turn me into a co-host. No, actually, I got it. Never mind.
I will still secretly do that in the background.
There we go. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
All right. So if you notice here, I've made a couple of edits. basically a couple of weeks ago, Julius mentioned, hey, isn't it time for us to have a meetup? It's been a couple of months. And I said, yep. And then Julius asked, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, there's this little thing I'm working on. I'm not sure if it's going to be like super shiny and ready by the time the meetup comes up, but maybe that's okay. I can show it to people, and then it'll be good anyways. To show it, expose it, and then get some feedback and opinions from others. So today I'd like to talk to you about looking at user feedback and then trying to avoid bad data. You would think that it's pretty straightforward to talk to users and then turn what they say into products they like to use. But if it was that easy, then I think a lot of us wouldn't have a job. So that's also not so bad. The beginning of this process started with a real story. So I'm going to suppress names and keep it a little bit general. But basically what happened to me one time, not too long ago, is I did a bit of research. I came back to my team and I said, hey, basically based on my findings, I think we're gonna have to make some really big changes. One of my colleagues who attended one of the sessions says, wait, I actually attended one of the sessions and I remember very clearly at the end, the participants said they love our idea. Another colleague who looked through my transcripts said, yeah, I read some of them. And in fact, yeah, I saw there are some good suggestions, maybe some suggestions that would be easy to implement. So maybe we can take some of those and we could just do that really fast. To which then I had to like go back and explain why that was not the case and why it wasn't so straightforward. And that's obviously like not a great position to be in. I thought then maybe, you know, there's a way that I could prevent this by explaining to my colleagues how to read the data. And then I continued to do, or I started to do like a sort of a checklist to do this. I wanted to make it as user-friendly so that I could just like give it to anyone and they would totally get it why sometimes what people say is not really what they mean. So then I made a checklist and I'm still working on it. And I was very much focused on these two events that happened. So, you know, when can we get bad data? And if you look at the process of planning an interview, you know, I plotted the steps and then I sort of put where are some of the most common traps that could happen to anyone running a study. So, you know, from writing a script and having some leading questions, questions about the future, having hypothetical scenarios, to then screening participants, running the interviews, and then finally analyzing the data. So the two examples from my colleagues happened in this area, but then I realized that, you know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong even before that. And then I actually started thinking even more about this and thought, actually, there's so much that can go wrong. There's, if you look at the entire spectrum of running a research project, there's a chance for something to go wrong in any of these steps. And actually, I'm still working on this. And today I just want to give you like a tiny sneak peek of what this is shaping up to be. And then maybe when I'm done towards January, then share the whole thing. This is basically, it's kind of like a quick, you know, a visual representation of research, kind of like a map, if you will, and all the traps that can happen at different stages, also for different types of research, right? So today, I would actually like to focus on this. But as you can see, things go wrong from the planning of the study, from choosing the wrong methodology. You know, if you get into surveys, there's so much that can go wrong with surveys. And actually, I think some of the hardest things to get right. And then if you get into tracking user logs, you know, which means like tracking user activities through tracking data like Mixpanel or something like that. Also so many things that can go wrong. But I would need, I don't know, a couple of sessions to go through that. So instead, today we're going to talk about this. And then once I'm done, I actually have a call to action at the end of the presentation I would love to ask for your help if you have experience with any of the other areas, or even the area that I'm going to talk about today, to help me complete a resource that could be useful to anyone in this meetup and then anyone who watches this recording later on. Cool. So another reason that I actually want to talk about this part of running a research project and avoiding bad data is because I really think that is the foundation of any good insight. So, anytime you're tracking user activity with your logs, or you're running any surveys, it is my opinion that they should be grounded on a deep understanding of your user. And the only way that you get to this understanding is actually to talking one-on-one with your users. So, a really good survey, it's built on top of that, that first research that you do, and also like any tracking that you do should also be based on some really solid understanding of your user that you do through interviews and basically like one-to-one conversations with the people you're trying to solve problems for. So that's the other reason I think it's important to talk about this. Now, this is also a bit of a continuation to the previous video. So if you want to watch it here, I think we talked about last time when Sam and I talked about our Insights repository, we talked about how we store everything. But I guess the talk today is much more centered around what is the data that we actually store. So there's a little bit of continuation there. Cool. So how do you identify bad data in user interviews is what we will be focusing on today. First of all, it's good to talk about, what is that user data? And there's a really famous UX designer researcher that I really like. Her name is Indy Young. A lot of you might know her already. And she has all these classifications of the data that a user can give you. And I don't know, if you read her book, and I might show you a link later, her book, Mental Models, is not an easy read, but one really cool thing that she has there is a classification of all the things that people say during an interview. And also like a pretty complex, in my opinion, and not so easy to follow manual of like how to classify those things. So if you want to get like in the nitty gritty of those things, I definitely recommend her book, although it's not an easy read, in my opinion. And I think there's a bit of an easier way. So maybe not as detailed and thorough as in this classification of things, but a really easy way to do it is when you're looking at the information that people give you during an interview, you're looking basically at two kinds of information. One is an opinion and the other one is a behavior. So here I have two examples. So let's just read them really quickly. An opinion would be something like when somebody says, I think sleep is very important and everyone should do their best to sleep for at least 8 hours every day. So that's something somebody says. It's very tempting to say, okay, so, if this was a product, it really looks like this could be somewhat of an insight. And today I want to convince you that it is not. Now let's look at a behavior, or rather like the something that people say that could be classified as a behavior. Last night I went to bed at 2 a.m. I was very stressed about my monthly report that I do for my manager. I was laying in bed but could not fall asleep, so I started looking at my phone. So let's look at the differences between those two things. An opinion usually involves a generalization. So anytime somebody says to you, I always do this, or it's always like this, or it's never like this, or everyone does this, or no one does that, that is an opinion. Could be grounded in an experience, but that itself is just an opinion. Also, the most important way to tell an opinion from a behavior in somebody tells you is that this cannot be placed in a timeline. So, when you're looking through your script or when you're talking to your customer and you look at this information right here, you can clearly say that, well, you will not be able to actually place this in some sort of timeline. While this one, you can say, okay, last night at 2 a.m. So that can be placed in a timeline. That is probably like the easiest way to tell one from the other. But a behavior is specific. It refers to a recent event in the past. Actually, a good piece of information refers to a recent event in the past, but sometimes people refer to things that happened a long time ago. And that might be a behavior as well, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. It involves at least one individual, which means there's somebody doing something in the story, which is something that, it's a very clear difference between these two. Like here, there's no one in particular that this person is talking about. Whereas in this one, the person is talking about himself. So that's another like big tell. Another like really good thing about these things, or like if you have a behavior, is it would be even better if the person can include some reaction. So how this made the person feel. Did they feel sad? Did they feel excited? Did they feel embarrassed? Especially feelings of embarrassment, by the way, are really important when it comes to user experience. And it can also include an assessment about impact. The word that you might not be seeing here is impact. What that means is like the person is telling you how this affects the use of your product, for instance. And they could say something along the lines of, oh, this is a deal breaker for me, or this is just slightly annoying, stuff like that. So that is, at a glance, some of the ways that you can identify an opinion from a behavior. And then here, what I wanted to show you is why that is important, or rather, I wanted to like give you an overview of when we're talking about interviewing people. I think there's a continuum in the quality of the information that you can get. So when you're talking to someone about an experience that they had, or you're talking to them about your product or a particular problem, the worst type of information that you can get are opinions, and then the best type of information that you can get are behaviors. So I draw the line right here. But even between that, there's like a gradient. So in my opinion, and also according to the sources that I've read, the worst possible type of information that you can have in your research is a prediction about future behavior. People are notoriously horrible at predicting their own behavior. And what this means basically is whenever somebody tells you, I mean, even something as simple as, yeah, tomorrow I won't be hungry at this time. I think that is something that a lot of people can relate to, like or like tomorrow I will feel like cleaning my room. If anybody like has had this happen to them and realized that that was not the case, this is exactly what I mean. So the worst question that you can have in an interview is to ask someone to predict what is going to happen to them in the future. For instance, hey, will you use our product 1 month from now? What do you think? That is some of the worst information that you can get. Very close to that is having a hypothetical scenario. And this is something that people really love to put in their interview questions. Something like, and actually this also you see very often when you go for job interviews and people tell you, hey, so imagine this situation, what would happen? How would you react? What would you think you would do? Again, this is also an opinion and is not very reliable. And in the scenario of a job interview, it just tells you how good the person is at coming up with, response that you want to hear, let's just say. Next to that is a generalization about a behavior, which is something similar to what I've shown you in the quote above. And that is always like saying things like, well, I always check my email in the morning, or I always have breakfast at 8. Those sort of things are not very good data, and you should avoid it. And we'll talk about how to avoid it a little bit later. And then we start to get into the realm of like, okay, this is good information, or this is better information. We start to get into, past the line of behaviors. So, the worst kind of like information in this realm that you could get is a memory about the distant past. We as humans don't have very good memories, unfortunately. And the way that our memory works, in fact, is that it can be influenced over time. So there are some really interesting exercises that you can do to actually check this. You can, there was a study that somebody ran after 9/11 where they asked people to write, like their recollection of the day. I think 1 week or 1 month after it happened. And then 1 year after the event, they asked them to write it again. And then they compared the two and they found like huge discrepancies. So it's not that people want to lie to you. We just have very bad memories, and we're also really bad at predicting our own behavior. So getting into the realm of like, pretty good stuff, you're asking someone about something that happened recently and that they did, and they give you specifics, such as the quote that I've shown you a few slides ago, where the person is sort of recalling the time when the thing happened and what was the sequence of events. So there you're starting to get into like, okay, this is pretty good information. What would be even better is actually witnessing the information in a control setting. So, we do this all the time when you bring somebody in, or you show them a prototype of what you have, and you ask them to perform a task. And the best possible information that you can get about people's behavior is actually witnessing the behavior in context. And we actually have names for these things. We usually call this an interview. We call this a usability test, and we call this a contextual inquiry. So there you go. This is why this is such a popular and like very well-respected way of doing research. There is also a continuum in the quality of the participants that you can get. The worst possible type of participant that you can get in a research study is someone in your implementation team, purely because they have a stake in the matter. They do care about how the project goes. And most likely, they don't have the necessary experience to give you, a good idea of whether your product is going to work or it's going to solve someone's problem or not. The next, which is a little bit better, might be a colleague who is unfamiliar with the project. We tend to actually do this a lot at Brandwatch in the beginning when we're trying to get a study going. We run pilots with our colleagues. The reason we also do that is because we actually have a lot of colleagues who use the software every day. So I consider like that to be like, okay, like that is definitely better than someone in the implementation team, because at least they use the software, but it's not great. The next better possible alternative is to have a random person off the street. This one's with a bit of a caveat. I think this applies especially if you're doing any sort of application that is a consumer application. Then this is definitely much more true. But if you're doing something that is like super specific, I don't know, let's say like accounting software or maybe CAD software, then you definitely need people who are familiar with the subject matter. So that wouldn't apply in this case. And obviously the best sort of participant is, that you can get is someone who's actually part of your target group. So what is the best possible feedback you can have? Is someone who combines these two sort of possibilities. So someone who is in your target group and who is actually about to engage in the activity that you're interested in studying. So this is where the goal of research is. We don't always get here, but this is definitely like the gold standard. When you're running a study, you want to get as close to this as possible. Sometimes you can't, but you want to get as close to this as you possibly can. Cool. So with that information, I thought we could do a quick exercise. And Julius, we prepared a poll in Zoom. Now we haven't used this before, so it might, I don't know if it's going to go well, but we'll find out.
Indeed.
Cool. Not sure how to make it work, but basically what I want to do is show you a statement, and then you guys can say if it's a behavior or an opinion. And that poll should appear um, as we go through the exercise. Cool. All right, so let's try it.
Sounds good. I will not launch it yet. I am.
Oh yeah, we can launch now. All right.
So I think that all three questions are shown at the same time. So obviously the first one relates to this quote, and then
yeah. So question number one, is this a behavior or an opinion? People should walk their dogs only in the evening. There are too many children playing during the day. All right. So I actually don't see. I don't know if I can
see it.
Say again.
I was just asking if people can see the poll.
So I can see the poll right here, but I'm not really sure how to make it work. Maybe because I'm the co-host.
Yeah, we've got one. I also cannot vote, so it's probably that hosts cannot participate.
All right, we got one answer.
I think we have to vote the 3 questions and then send them.
Ah, damn it. Okay.
That's the thing.
I see. So
okay, well, just answer the first question first, and then we'll go through all of them and then submit at the end.
All right.
So, okay. Maybe you guys can emoji react if you already answer this. And thank you, Eliana, for the tip.
Okay, we've got 3 thumbs ups. By the way, emoji react, basically you see the reactions icon at the bottom right. That's
I think what we'll do is we'll just like give it a minute and then we'll go through all them. Okay, so I prefer to let my phone ring if I don't know the number. These are, by the way, from real studies. So cool. I'm going to let that run for 10 seconds. All right, last one. I think driving is relaxing if the car is nice. Last year, my family and I made a long road trip to celebrate my dad got a brand new car. Gonna give it 10 seconds. Nice. And I'm gonna end the poll now. All right, yeah, looks like we did really well. So I'm gonna share the results with everyone. 20 people voted. And yeah, so let's just look through them just really quickly. People should walk their dogs only in the evening. There are too many children playing during the day. Yeah, so, I mean, the person is kind of talking about children, but there's really no specifics and this cannot be placed on a timeline. So it's definitely an opinion, as 95% of you guessed. Very cool. I prefer to let my phone ring if I don't know the number. This one is tricky, actually. I think this is actually an opinion, but it's actually the beginning of, and the reason, well, it's talking about an event that happens, but it's generalizing. So the way, and we're going to talk about the strategies to avoid these kind of things. But the way to avoid an opinion that looks like a behavior is to ask the person about the last time that this happened. So in this interview, I can tell you what happened because I did this. The follow-up question is like, can you tell me the last time that this happened? And then at that point, like they can provide some specifics. Sometimes they actually remember there are exceptions to this. And, you know, like, I think the person said something like, oh, well, you know, except if my mom calls because my mom is, or it was like, no, when my sister was pregnant and I was waiting for a call, so I was taking everything. So there's always like, whenever you can see an exception that happens, you need to follow up with a question. And the last one, this one was like pretty split, so 45, 55. I think driving is relaxing if the car is nice. Last year, my family and I made a long road trip to celebrate my dad got a brand new car. So this one I would say is a behavior. You can actually place it in a timeline. It was last year. And you can definitely see who are the people taking part in this behavior. So in this case was the user or the participant and his family. Cool. So yeah, that was pretty fun. Thank you for taking part. Okay, so how do you prevent bad data when planning your interviews? So now, now that we have like some definitions in place, now we can actually talk about those two things that I mentioned at the beginning. So how do you avoid bad data when planning the interviews? So you're preventing that you're gonna get bad data. And then after that, we're gonna talk about how you avoid the data as you're running the interview. So the number one tip that I can give you is ask questions about the past. This is actually a bit of a rule that we have in the team whenever like we write a script for an interview. A really good rule of thumb is that you always want to ask questions about the past. Sometimes the research question is asking something like, would users use this product? And that might be an okay research question, but when you translate that into a transcript, it would be better to ask about, hey, when was the last time that you used a similar product? For instance, like when you're talking about a product that doesn't exist, you want to ask about when was the last time this person tried to solve that problem that you're trying to solve with your product. That is a much more reliable question than asking, would you use my product? So always speak in the past tense. And yeah, here's one example. Based on how your day is going, how hungry will you be in the evening? So this seems like a reasonable question, but again, you're asking someone to predict their behavior in the future, and that is just like not very reliable. A better answer would be, how hungry were you yesterday evening? Just anchoring that question in a very specific moment will give you better data. Never ask hypotheticals. So definitely anytime you start a question with would, you know you're probably going to get bad data. So a question like, how would you react if you saw someone not wearing a mask in the bus? This is a pretty current topic and maybe even a little bit controversial for some people. So, depending on who you talk to, I think they're going to give you like some pretty strong answers. But again, you're asking these people to predict their behavior. So a better version of this question would be, have you ever seen someone not wearing a mask in the bus? How did you react? This would give you much better data. The other thing that is very important, and I think this is a little bit more well-known, but nonetheless, it's good to mention it. Always ask neutral questions. So something like saying, do you agree people need to eat healthy food? Well, duh. The problem here is healthy. That just like implies that obviously, like if you ask someone, like they're not going to tell you no, or most people won't tell you no. A better version of this is, when was the last time you ate at a fast food restaurant, or some variation of this sort. But again, always asking about the past and always asking about a behavior that happened recently. Cool. So let me clear my throat. So that is before the interview. However, there's always bad data coming in live. And so the question is here, how do you course correct while you're running an interview? Bad data in interviews, in my experience, comes in two forms. One is fluff or generalities. So this is basically the same thing. And the other form comes in the form of opinions, which is something we mentioned a little bit ago, but also in the form of product requests. So like ideas that people have or that they want to suggest to you. So the first one, I think Actually, no, I think both are just equally common, in my experience at least. So when it comes to fluff, you need to anchor it. And this is what I was talking about earlier about following up and having a follow-up question to generalities or generalizations. So for instance, somebody who says, I go to bed every day at 10 p.m. Then you can follow up every time you hear something that says every time, every day, everybody. Something should go like your spidey sense should be tingling, and then you should have a follow-up question. Interesting. At what time did you go to bed last night? So something that is the follow-up question is about a recent behavior in the past, and the person actually walked a statement back. So at 10 p.m. Well, actually, I think 12 p.m. because I was helping my daughter with her homework. So having those exceptions and knowing about those exceptions is really is super important. Cool. So how do you combat opinions, ideas, or feature requests? Here, you just need to dig a little bit deeper. It's very similar to the last one, actually. But somebody might say to you, and again, it's a real quote, I really dislike waking up to an alarm clock. Maybe if it had a nicer sound, like classical music, maybe. To which I replied, well, tell me more about the last time your alarm clock woke you up. Well, I don't actually have one. My partner has to get up much earlier than I do, so she usually wakes me up. I don't really need an alarm. I thought this one was particularly comic because some people have very strong opinions, and that is just part of their personality. They say something with such conviction that you're thinking, okay, yeah, this person is, he's onto something. And this person even had a really good, what seemed to me like a reasonable suggestion. But once you dig in a little bit deeper, you realize that this is just an opinion, and this person doesn't even have this very specific problem that the person is talking about. So always, always, always follow up whenever you hear product requests or opinions. In fact, I would say treat all these things as invitations to just ask for more details, and then sit back and watch as the person reveals more details, what they really mean or what their real experience was. Cool. So let's quickly summarize. So behaviors are good, opinions are bad. If we want to dumb it down a little bit. So how do you prevent bad data in your scripts? Well, always ask questions about the past. 2, ask neutral questions. And 3, avoid any hypotheticals. And then how do you avoid bad data during an interview? You always want to anchor any generality by asking for specifics. And you want to always dig into opinions, ideas, and requests to actually understand what people mean. So that is my talk for today, but here's my call to action to you and the next steps. If you would like to see the final version, and I can show you just really quickly. I'm still working on this. So I'm working on a master map of all this, along with the resources. Because by the way, I didn't come up with all this stuff. Obviously, there's a bunch of very smart people who figured this out, and I just happen to have read a lot of the stuff. My plan is to continue with surveys and then, tracking user logs. So if you're interested in getting this as an infographic, sometime in January, I would say, I would invite you to fill up this form. But I'm also interested if you have experience with surveys or also interviews or also tracking user behavior with any software like Mixpanel, Hotjar, and etc. And you would like to contribute to this, I would be absolutely ecstatic. I don't want to sell this or anything. I want to give it up for free because I think it's could be a really useful thing for anyone, and could just really help us advance product design and product research and educate everybody around us, make them a good researcher, and then just basically have easier conversations about what data matters and which should be ignored. Yeah, and that's me. Now you know. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you very much, Edwin. A round of applause. I think that was really,
Thank you.
really like a very good points, and I think it was really nice to learn a few more things than like keep it neutral basically, or like don't just lead with would you agree or so.
Yeah.
I think I'm like we're both looking at the chat, I guess now. So far there's a lot of thank yous for you. So yeah, have a lot of beer. And that it was very interesting. We've got one comment from further up from Carsten, who said that someone in the like commented on someone in the target group that he's made the experience that some people just hated the product and did not want it to look good. So consider emotional bias depending on their past experience and relationship as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Carsten, you don't have to, but would you like to expand on that? If not, that's okay. I think I generally agree with the statement. Okay.
There's lots more thank yous and looking forward to the infographic. One thing I was wondering, Edwin, actually, could you post that form? I mean, I'm sure you're going to post it on the Meetup page, but maybe also here in the chat. So while it's fresh,
yeah,
people can open it in their browser and fill it in.
It's a really good shout. Thank you.
And then I've had one. Yeah, like that maybe next time a few more tips about the mistakes that can be made in usability testing.
Yeah, like I said, when I it's funny because obviously what prompted me like working on this guide was just this one experience, but as I was thinking about bad data, I'm like, well, it can happen in so many ways. That is just like a little small part of the journey, right? I think especially in surveys, like it can be daunting, like the amount of bad data that can happen. Also, I'm not like, to be also absolutely honest, I'm most experienced with running interviews. So if anybody here has got experience with surveys, I mean, I know some stuff up here and obviously I'm really happy to share it, but I would be very happy to hear if anybody wants to contribute their experience with surveys or tracking user behavior. That would be also really cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the surveys one as well. There's another comment from Eliana: getting to know your target group before the interviews, in brackets background information, is sometimes also very important. Then you can also know their vocabulary, for example.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, understanding how, especially if you're in like a specialized field, knowing how your target group talks about the things that they care about, can really inform how you're going to write that survey or your interview script, and obviously ultimately how the UX copy is going to look on your product. So.
Which, if you happen to be a customer of Brandwatch, you can actually easily do using Brandwatch and the audience and persona research functionality that we offer. Yeah, I was going to ask you, but I think you did a good job at the end. But like, if we only take away one thing from this presentation, what should it be? Which of the tips?
Yeah, I think. Well, like I think the one thing that always gets people in trouble is hearing compliments from users, and then ignoring everything else in the session. So there's even like sometimes one thing that happened recently, actually, it was really cool that it happened because it's the first time that I saw it. Is someone really struggling with a task? So, I can count like 10 mistakes, or rather not mistakes, but the person struggling with 10 different parts of the task. And then at the end of the interview, we ask, hey, so how do you feel? And the person saying like, oh, it's absolutely fantastic. I love the new look. It's really, really nice. And that is the first time that I ever saw, I think it's called like aesthetic usability bias, which means you are much more tolerable of interfaces that look really good. And the problem with that is that that fades away actually. Like after you try the product a couple of more times, your perception that it's a great product because it looks great goes away because you realize how much effort you have to put in to complete the task. So it was really important to see the person fail many times in the task and then giving self-report saying that, oh, it was really nice. And I think a lot of times a lot of people go away with that, which is like the final remarks from the interview, where people say, oh, this was great. And I think that's really dangerous. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. We've got a comment from Alex. People are lying about themselves.
Yeah.
Philosophical nearly here.
Yeah. And you know what, like, the other thing to keep in mind is that no one does it on purpose. It's how, like, is what people do. I think especially when it comes to opinions, depending also on your personality, there's a lot of people who will tend to agree more than you or will be much more invested in having a pleasant session than actually telling you how they feel. So that's why it's also really important to, look for those behaviors and ask about their previous experiences.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then we've got from I'm learning UX. Any tips on how to invite people to interviews outside from a friend circle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's like the $1 million question. Yeah.
Got $1 million to offer, then it's easy.
Yeah. So what I would say, and I mean, also I'm also really interested in if somebody else has different tips, because I'm sure other people have other experiences. Our experience is much more geared towards the business applications, and we also have a pretty large user base. Well, relatively large, so we can always recruit from our existing user base, and we always have trouble recruiting outside of it. And in fact, it's very expensive. So yeah, actually, I don't have any specific tips because I haven't done it myself in a long time where I have to reach out to users who are outside of our user base. So if anybody has any tips, that would be really cool.
Put them in the chat or write that, or just speak up, of course, here.
Yeah. I think Carsten is saying, in these times, how do you conduct interviews, most probably remotely? Do you have tips for best practices to share how to do interviews remotely? Yeah, actually, funny enough, at Brandwatch, we primarily do remote interviews, even before the pandemic. So I have a couple of tips. There's a really cool feature with Zoom called, remote, well, what do you call it? Remote control. So sometimes, we have prototypes and we don't want to share a link with someone because of privacy issues or whatnot. So you can let somebody control your computer and show them like a live prototype that might not be online, and that seems to be super useful. Then obviously I would definitely recommend Calendly for organizing this stuff. That is actually what we do. No endorsement or anything. But yeah,
quickly explain what Calendly is for people, for some of us that don't know.
Calendly is an application for scheduling anything. It's not specific to user research, but so once you want to organize when to talk to people, it's nice about creates an event in your Google Calendar, and you can then attach like a Zoom meeting to it. It's pretty easy. So I would recommend that for scheduling it. And like I said, using remote control to let people use new prototypes.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, I think in general, like making people feel comfortable that if they don't want to show their face or something like that, like that's okay. In our case, what works really well is the fact that most of the times we actually want to see their screen. And sharing your screen over, you know, these applications is actually really good. Yeah. So we have
On the other question around like how to recruit people, obviously there is also the option. I think there are agencies that can do that for you, and there's this in between thing. There are some companies. I was approached by them a long time ago, like a German company, for example, called Testbirds. Their main focus is QA, so like testing for quality and functionality, but they also have like focus on they can test stuff for you basically with a large user base that they've acquired over the years. So you could run things via such services or a kind of agencies no, agency is the wrong word, but yeah, something like Testbirds comes to mind, but there are many, I think, that can help you test stuff. Obviously, it always depends a little bit on what kind of product you have.
There's one tip that I heard from so one of the guys that I use as a reference. He wrote a book called the Mom Test. It's a really good book. I really recommend it, about doing interviews. And when it came to recruiting people, he was talking about actually creating meetup events. So you know, you set up a meetup event about a topic you're interested in, and then you would know that a lot of the people who show up are interested in the topic that you want to talk about. So I thought that was like really like sneaky, but really cool. I mean, why not?
That's a nice one. Also, Alexander had some good tips like doing Facebook posts, Instagram posters at university for students, where you kind of say like 5 to 10 euros per hour. Or in big companies, you can use mailing lists, posters in canteens, friends of your friends, and stuff like that. And Carsten said Sounding Box allows to do remote tests and also allows to recruit UX testers from a selected target group, but not cheap. Maybe good then. So that, yeah, that sounds a bit similar to the, at least how Testbirds was a few years ago. Sounding Box, good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely like recommend, if somebody tries the meetup approach, let me know. I want to know how it goes.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then there's Stephanie says Testing Time is also one of the agencies we're working with to recruit users.
Okay.
Great. I guess we have time for like one final question if it comes. Or a final note from you, Edwin. There's a lot more thank yous. I think we've had at least as many thank yous as participants, so that's really great.
Nice.
And people looking forward to the next meetup.
Sweet.